Okay. Despite multiple schemes implemented by various governments around the country, affordable housing remains elusive to the average Nigerian. Over 52% of Nigeria's population has been claimed to live in shanties, squatter communities, and informal settlements. I'm talking about shanties and slums. We have them in abundance. Minister of Housing and Urban Development, Ahmed Kangiwa, said that the country will require, wait for it, 5 million houses in the next 10 years to bridge the housing deficit. You described Nigeria's housing deficit as both a challenge and an opportunity for transformative change.
You know, the first thing that came to my mind when you say 5 million, when you said 5 million houses, my mind just went to, so how much does it cost to build one?
Well,
on the average, maybe, let's say 50 million, depending on location.
No, we'll have to find cheaper ways of building houses if we want to build that many.
Where?
Well, we are seeing all kinds of developments in other parts of the world where they just prefabricate something, just lift it from somewhere and deposit it. House done ready.
True. You can do that for villages in Lagos. You don't go buy land.
we have an architect to tell us more and give us developments in this area that we're talking about. How can we build cheaper houses so that our people stop living in slums and shanties? That's the only way that we can, increase this housing deficit that we're talking about. It's my pleasure to welcome Ezekiel Nya-Etuk, Executive Director, Estate Services, Federal Housing Authority. And he joins us from our studio in Abuja. Ezekiel, good morning. Good to see you.
Good morning and happy new month to Nigeria.
Did you say that just to upset me, Ezekiel? Well, I'm saying to you, Happy New Year. Okay, Ezekiel. This matter of housing, it has become a rather vexed issue because we have too many Nigerians living in places that many feel are not fit for human beings to live in. So let us start by talking about what government is doing to reduce this deficit that we have in housing, and to which the minister responded that we need 5 million houses in the next 10 years. How?
Okay. First, it's good to see you again. I have been on leave of absence, so to speak, because for over 30 years I have been talking, and in a very curious way, Mr. President said, Mr. Talker, oh yeah, come and sit down, let's see what you can do. Because it's so easy to do analysis on television and talk, government has not, but when you come inside, that's why Nigerians don't want to hear me talk anymore. They want to see, because anybody can talk. I can't be an advocate on the seat I sit right now. I have to be able to come to tell Nigerians that, oh boy, that thing where they talk before, it'd be like saying, no, they're possible. Or I will tell them really based on very, very well-defined parameters that there is hope and we can have housing revolution. It's taken me a lot of thinking, praying, and energy to be on this program today because I need to be very careful with every word I say and every statement I make. Secondly, I will not have the liberty of doing general analysis, talking about everything. I have a very definite portfolio and institution, so I'll be talking more authoritatively about the Federal Housing Authority. And if you look at it by the mandate of that body, we are responsible for housing delivery of the federal government of Nigeria. So I think that Nigerians can very, very easily, in every local government, say, those people are supposed to be the people that to build for us. What are they doing? So I'm going to be on that bit. The first part is the current administration. Are they doing anything different? Is there any substance to the talk we always hear? Because every administration has ministry that has housing, either as a standalone or subset. They have all programs and everything. At the end of the year, what do you see? Nothing, next to nothing. So, Ezekiel, can you tell us, as somebody that Nigerians trust, that there is substance in this current administration? And I need to be careful because after this administration, I will still be around and people will quote what I said. The first thing is that I will say with every sense of responsibility that this is the first administration that I know of that has a certain level of political will as concerning housing that you cannot in any way contest, even if you are not a friend of the government. I'll give you 1, 2, 3 very clear examples. Number one is giving us a standalone ministry for housing. That's absolutely important. We've always been a poor wife of a polygamous family where you have Ministry of Works and Housing, Power, Works and Housing. And between Power and Works, you know that housing is like an irritant, so they don't care. But when you have Ministry of Housing, you have nobody to blame. That's the first thing. The second thing is giving us a leadership that is informed. The current Minister of Housing was the managing director of Federal Mortgage Bank. So he is a player, a major player in the industry. So he comes with knowledge of the challenges of the industry. The third is the two arms of the two agencies that are responsible for the supply and the demand arms of housing in Nigeria, talking about Federal Mortgage Bank and Federal Housing Authority. They are today led by extremely informed, passionate, articulate, and committed people, and I will tell you how. And the relationship between the minister, the Federal Mortgage Bank, the Federal Housing Authority is in a way that I've hardly seen in the past. The synergy, the understanding, the friendship, the passion to bring about this sort of housing delivery that we want is something that we are very, very proud of. In the Federal Housing Authority, let me take it home. There are certain things that Nigerians will hear and they're like, okay, that makes sense. And the essence of this program, my being here, is to be able to say 1, 2, 3 things that Nigerians can hold to and say, this makes sense or it doesn't make sense. The first is, let's get to Federal Housing Authority. My sister Alero, I will shock you by saying that next month makes us 1 year since we were brought on board by Mr. President. And that all of us, starting from our MD, we are all still driving the old hillocks that we met in the administration, all of us, including myself, including the MD. Number two is that, which shows, and we're all people who have been blessed by God, accomplished before we came there, so nobody's looking for houses, lands. It's like, what can we do? The second thing is what the sort of leadership that we have. We have a managing director that is, and I want to say this, meaning no harm, that is a workaholic. The man is, people just see him as the president's relation or something, but I think that's the worst thing you can do to that guy. He is one of the most committed and passionate people about housing that I've seen in my entire life. And he's driven us such that even some of us that were like, oh, champions, we are starting to feel a little worried because We've gone as at today to a minimum about 28 states, and 85% of them by road. We drive the management team, we go and sit down with the governor one-on-one. And at the end of 2-3 hours interaction, the governor gets to hear us, to understand us, to form a synergy and a partnership led by our MD, who goes by road. Once in a while, I've had to fly, but he goes by road. You understand me? And at the end of the day, I want you to know, I want Nigerians to know that we have land in about 30 or 32 states. We have land, not just land. We go to visit the land and we do technical analysis with respect to access, infrastructure, livability.
Perhaps the challenge.
Yes.
My apologies. Perhaps the challenge here.
Yes,
and I'm glad that, for the work that you've done in the past 1 year, as you have said, 28 states, as we'll stay on the streets, it's not be beans. So, and having to travel by road means that you have seen all of the challenges and all of the potentials. What are the challenges that you see in the way? If we will require, at the very least, 5 million houses over the next 10 years, what are the inhibitions on the way? Why are people living in shanties in various parts of the country? What are the inhibitions you've seen? What are the challenges? And what are the opportunities that you see?
Okay, awesome. You know, when we came in, we decided to approach this matter from first principles. Like I said, we are led by a man who is a lawmaker on one hand and a practitioner in the industry, talking about Honorable Oyetunde Ojo. So the first thing we did was to lock ourselves inside the house, led by him, to look at exactly what you have said. What are the challenges? I'll tell you number one challenge: cost, delivery cost. How do you solve? Let me tell Nigerians, if you look at my fingers, number one is that you must get land if you are to build a house, and the cost of land, infrastructure, and everything. You must go ahead to get the necessary materials. That's another aspect. You must look at the funding. You must look at the skills. These are the different dynamics you must look at. But the first one is land. So we now said, you can't talk of providing houses except you get land. Number two, you can't talk of providing affordable houses except these lands are affordable. So that's what informed the MD, leading us to go and have an interface with the governor. And each governor, he says, look, if we are going to build houses in your state, it's for your people. And look at the cost factors of these houses. So what do you think? Can you give us land free and pay compensation? Can you give us infrastructure? Can you in any way take up a percentage of the sales and everything, on which basis you can choose to subsidize for your people? And I want to say that every governor, I don't know how my MD did it, I don't know, but every governor has given us land free. We're not paying for any land, so we're going to discount cost of land. Many of them, virtually all of them, are paying compensation. I can talk boldly because I'm from Akwa Ibom State, and I'm so happy that my governor was one of those given Governor of the Year, because he's giving us extremely well-located land, choice land, just about 7 minutes to the airport, on the dual carriage expressway, directly on the road. And then he is paying full compensation on it. And if my memory sounds me right, he's doing something about infrastructure on it. So what has been the challenge? The challenge has been cost. How are we addressing it from first principles? We are getting land free. We are getting compensation paid on the land. And on many occasions, virtually all, we are getting infrastructure. So that is one arm of the delivery concerning cost. Nigerians need houses, but there is affordability gap concern. And that's what we've done so far. Like I said, I don't know how my MD did it, but how he got every governor to give us land for free. He got all of them to pay compensation. and is getting virtually all of them to give us infrastructure. I think that's a major challenge that we saw and a major solution I can tell Nigerians as at today. Okay. Not what will be, but what is.
Okay. Ezekiel, strictly speaking, of these 5 million houses that the minister says that we need in the next 10 years, how much of it can government provide on its own? And are you having any interface with developers and financiers who are going to help in this endeavor?
Great question. The first thing is, like I said, I want to be issue and location specific, talking about Federal Housing Authority of Nigeria, where I'm privileged by Mr. President's legendary magnanimity to be a part of. The first thing is that FHA is not funded by government. We generate our funds 100%. We don't have any, we are not on budget, okay? Now, when we went to do our budget presentation, the National Assembly, for the first time, I've been on several presentations on housing, even when I'm not involved in it, I just go out of interest. I've been a consultant to the Senate on housing, so I'm very, very versed and informed about their proceedings. For the first time, they said, we are on camera and we want to record it. Honorable Oyetunde Ojo, I don't know how you've done it, but I want to say that you need support of government. Because if you have not been on budget, you've just come on, and within a year, you are not only making this level of progress, but you are paying. You know, government takes a percentage of what we have as profit, so to speak. And we have so far, I think this is public knowledge or information. There's nothing exclusive. As at today, I think we've paid nothing less than 4 billion to government, though not being on budget. So they said, if we are not giving you strategic support and you can do this, imagine what you can do if government gives you a certain strategic support. Well, we don't want money to pay salaries. We don't want money for overheads. We don't want, no, we have our money. We are doing well. We are not owing salaries. Our MD is a genius. I don't know how he does it, but we are doing well. We've paid us, we've upped our salaries. You know, we are one of the best paying institutions, and we generate our funds and we are paying. So we don't want money for, management and no. They are saying, if we give you a certain capacity, you will be able to do so much more. So coming back, we are networking with government on that arm. We are networking with individuals. I head the estates directorate, and we are having networking with people on bringing about sustainability policy in our estate. FHA, by the way, has some of the most beautiful estates in Nigeria, but some of our estates have gotten to a state that we are really not happy with it. Festac is one of our estates, and we're not happy with what is happening in Festac.
Well, I guess
Gwarimpa is one of our estates. Shauda in Kano is one of our estates.
I guess that already underscores some of the work that you have to do, Mr. Nyetuk. But what's the nexus? For instance, you said the major challenge of the housing deficit that we have is funding. But then we also know that there is such a thing as the National Housing Fund, which is managed by the Federal Mortgage Bank of Nigeria. You can please correct me if I'm wrong. So what's the nexus between the FHA, who is charged with the responsibility of providing houses or housing for people, and the FMB, Federal Mortgage Bank, which is also statutorily taxed with the responsibility of providing funding or facilitating funding for those houses for people?
Fantastic question. Fantastic question. Not long ago, we were in a session, FHA, Federal Mortgage Bank. The working relationship between you and I is work of amazing friends. while the minister says on one hand, the MD of Federal Mortgage Bank and the MD of Federal Housing Authority and the management team, one of our EDs, Amalam Dan Kane, was an ED in Federal Mortgage Bank. So you can imagine the interface, the nexus, the MD himself, all of us. But to the issue, because friendship does not translate to solutions, we have sat down and we say we are a providing entity. Though we have a mortgage bank, because we have FHA Mortgage Bank, Federal Mortgage Bank of Nigeria, how can you kind of take off or off-take or come and provide, Federal Mortgage Bank works through primary mortgage banks, but the primary mortgage banks feed from the Federal Mortgage Bank. How can you increase your capacity so that houses are no longer cash and carry like it is in Nigeria today? In Nigeria today, if you want to buy a house, it's like you want to buy a car. You go to ask for a mortgage, they are telling you 2 years, 3 years. You hardly find any organization that gives you 5 years. And mortgage is supposed to be 20 years, 30 years. That's in some cases, you can even extend to 40 years. That's what mortgage is. That's why the guy in the university can come out and be sure that he can have funding to get a one-bedroom apartment and pay over a period. And people can give him that money because they know that he has 40 working years or even 30 or even 20. So within this period, so that culture of mortgage is lacking, is not almost non-existent in Nigeria.
Interest rate,
that is why Federal Housing Authority, let me just say this.
Just a sec.
Federal Housing Authority.
To speak to a quick question on the issue you just raised, at what interest rate is the return going to be made?
I'll tell you this. You can't talk of interest rate on what does not exist. Federal Mortgage Bank, we in Federal Housing Authority, we are a major advocate that Federal Mortgage Bank should be recapitalized, given the money. It is when you have the money that you now say at what interest rate. They do have the money for what are the trickles that were coming, but for the volume that Federal Housing Authority is bringing right now, they need a lot more capacity to give a lot more mortgages to a lot more people. And that of Federal Mortgage Bank, to the best of my knowledge, is single digit. I can tell you that authoritatively, which is what makes it real, mortgage.
Ezekiel, yes, but that is hardly possible because the Federal Mortgage Bank is not going to operate in a silo. It's going to operate in Nigeria, in the economy of Nigeria. And there's no way they can give in the loans for single digit interests. There's no way. No, they are. I'm not saying what we hope. That's what they've been doing over time, throughout. Federal Mortgage Bank has never given. What effect? They always give on single digit. What effect has this had? How many mortgages have they given in the last 10 years? That is because, good question, great question. You can't give what you don't have. That's why we are not Federal Mortgage Bank. We are Federal Housing Authority, and yet we are saying, and we are calling on Nigerians to prevail on their constituencies, their representatives, to say, recapitalize or enhance Federal Mortgage Bank so that they will have the money to give us a lot more mortgages. They are doing very well, I would say that. But they need their capacity, and even the National Assembly right now is putting their voice to it to say, give Federal Mortgage Bank the money they need. So the federal government will have to see the need to give Federal Mortgage Bank the money so that when we build houses, we have ready-made off-takers waiting. I'll just give you a very little example. In Kano, we are starting, I'm sure you have heard that we have advertised, let me put it that way, a layman's language, for people to bid to build the houses, because we are starting from 17 states where we are going to do 200 houses. But let me bring out something you should see here. 200 houses will take less than 10 hectares. In Kano, we have 150 hectares.
Why do we want to start with 200? Because my MD says I cannot bring contractors to site and not have the money to pay them. He will not. He says, on my integrity, I will not bring contractors to site. So we are now working based on the budget we've been able to bring out so far. Even taking that 17 states at about 200 houses, we need over 60 billion to pay the workers, the contractors. We're not talking of infrastructure. We're not talking anything. Okay,
right,
how do we generate
We're running out of time, and I know that you would want to explain to people as much as possible. But a quick follow-up to that question you just raised. Here is someone sending us, Ajiboye, sending a message, says, my concern is, why do we have a lot of abandoned projects in Abuja, and I'm sure in various other parts of the country? But speaking to Abuja specifically, especially along Airport Road, more painful is the fact that many civil servants struggle to pay rent and do not have access or hope of getting a house assisted by the federal government, especially rent-to-own programs. So on the one hand, so it's like a kind of two-in-one question, and you have 30 seconds to answer this one.
Because there are many more questions waiting for you.
Yeah, so on the one hand, there are abandoned projects, federal government projects all over the country, and they're uninhabited. On the other hand, rent-to-own programs that even government staff can't access.
Two things. The very first is that, like I said, let me be careful because I would like to be quoted. I like to talk about Federal Housing Authority. There is not one, apart from Akampa, Odukpani in Cross River, which we have gone back to look at it, and maybe Goningora, which we've also gone to look at it and address the issues that were there. There isn't one abandoned Federal Housing Authority estate in Nigeria, and we have over 50 estates. There's not one that is not fully built and being occupied. There's not one abandoned, because we are careful to look at the...
That's the first one, and that is noted. How about the second issue? Very quickly.
The second issue is like the rent to own and all those things. It has to do with the supply end. We can only supply what we can have the capacity to supply, except we are given that impetus from above, which we are believing that this government, with the political will that they have demonstrated, they are going to say, Federal Housing Authority, we've seen your passion, we've seen your commitment, we've seen your forthrightness. We can afford to take a risk on you. We are going to give you capacity so that you don't just do 200 houses. Like I tried to explain, 200 houses is about 10 hectares or less.
Ezekiel,
here we have in Akwa Ibom, we have 50 hectares.
We've got to take comments from our viewers so that you can respond to all of them. This one is from Osas, and he says, with the huge housing deficit and rising rents that are crushing mid and low-level government staff and Nigerian workers at large, I have still not heard your guest tell us about availability, how to access it, and the framework for subscription.
Fantastic. Number one is availability. We have said we are starting with 200 because of the funds we have. The moment we have more money, we're not going to start jobs that we're not going to pay the contractors 1,000 when you don't have the money. No. Our MD says he has integrity and he will leave some here for somewhere else tomorrow. So the moment we have, I am looking forward. I'm really believing that
is there a
the government will come
already?
and say, Federal Housing Authority, do it this way. That's number one.
Good.
Supply is a function of
can
funds.
Register and say, okay, go to this website or go to this platform to subscribe, so to speak?
Luckily, in FHA, we are fully digitalized. The only thing is that we are careful to open our platforms per time, not before time. It's easy to ask people, go there, and people are paying money when you have not supplied the houses. No, there's room for integrity. But we have fha.gov.ng. fha.gov.ng.
Okay.
There you'll be able to see the Renewed Hope program of FHA. You know, Renewed Hope is the mantra of the current administration. So the Minister of Housing is doing Renewed Hope. You know, Murphy is doing Renewed Hope. I think somebody has just logged in there. Fantastic. That's it. So it's a live website. So you can go in there. Now, when we have hit the ground running.
Ezekiel, I've got to interrupt because we've almost run completely out of time, and I want to get this message from a viewer in. Other than government, which is a faceless bunch of bureaucrats building houses, how is FHA helping to demonstrate that houses can be cheaper to build than what they currently cost?
Beautiful. Number one, FHA is knocking off all the cost of land. We're not hoping to, we have already done that. Number two, we are knocking off all the costs of other facilities associated, like paying compensation, because of our partnership with the government, and we need to thank all the governors because all of them have subscribed to it. So the cost of land and infrastructure is getting off, which is one of the major components. What we are dealing with now is cost of construction, which is what we are still dealing with. And we don't want to build cheap houses, not cheap houses, houses that are not standard, okay? So we are working on cost. We have an informed, person that is in charge, Engineer Omona, Remy. He was a minister, a commissioner for works in, I think it was Osun State. So he comes with that knowledge and understanding of the construction subsector. He is the executive director, project implementation, and is working on cost directly with our procurement subsector. So at the end of the day, because of taking care of this, our houses are going to be lower and more affordable.
Ezekiel Etiuk, you need to come back from time to time and give us the current picture. Because all these things you are saying, Nigerians are looking at you and saying all that is on pages of newspaper. We need to see the houses. And all the things you say you're doing, you have to come back
please, I'd like to
and be telling us as you go along. Quickly, quick.
What FHA is not papers. The lands that we have in 28 states is not paper, is land that we have title.
Okay.
The procurement that we've done in 17 states is not paper. And in the next couple of weeks or months, once we finish procurement, we are starting to build in 17 states.
Okay. Okay. You still need to bring us up to speed as you go along so that we'll see all the milestones. Mr. Ezekiel Etiuk, who is an architect, is the Executive Director, Estate Services, Federal Housing Authority. Thank you very much for coming to talk to us about housing in Nigeria and how we can bridge the gap in the availability of housing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thank you for staying with us. Sunrise will return in just a moment with another interesting conversation.